Sure, it's a part of town that has a high turnover rate. Transients and laborers, bartenders, the kind of folks who have seen it all. I'm a Sonoma County Deputy District Attorney, and I help the cops investigate the big crimes. My name's Hoyle, George Hoyle. I got word that there was a resident over on Davis Street, a Mrs. Girolo. She might have seen what happened today, so let's go pay her a visit.
Oh, Mr. Hoyle, I'm so glad you're here. This was terrible. Paul Zimmerman's dead.
And where were you, Mrs. Girolo?
Well, I was here on my porch, and I saw a car pull up. And the men inside were speaking loudly. Then the passenger got out, he put his foot on the running board, and he began to beat the driver over the head with something like a hammer. Then I heard shots. The passenger got out, and he just walked away.
Could you tell if he was injured?
He wasn't injured. I saw Arthur Huntington, and I told him to follow that man. I think he just killed somebody. I went to the car, and there was Mr. Zimmerman, the realtor. He was dead. He had blood coming from his head, and it looked to me like he was trying to defend himself.
How about you, Arthur? What'd you see?
Well, I was standing on the corner when the car pulled up. I also heard the loud arguing within the car. And then I see the passenger just start punching the driver in the head. Then I hear 4 shots. Then the passenger gets out of the car, just starts walking away. Mrs. Girolo, she tells me to follow, so of course that's what I do. And then I saw something very strange.
Saw what?
Well, the fella takes the gun from his pocket, starts beating himself over the head with it, starts smearing blood all over his face, and then he keeps right on walking, straight up to 5th and Washington, where he turns himself into Perry Jewett at the service station. Perry takes his gun, drives him to the station.
Thanks for your time, you two. I better go talk to Perry Jewett. He's the grease monkey down at the service station. Are you Perry Jewett?
Yes, sir. What can I do for you?
I'm George Hoyle with the DA's office. What happened here today?
Well, we were at the station, and the man came up covered in blood. He said, I just shot a man and take me to the sheriff. Well, the other boys, they took off running when they heard that, but not me. I put him in my car and took him to the sheriff. Arthur Huntington had told me that he had a gun, so I checked his pockets and I found this. Said his name was Robert Burkett, but other than that, he didn't say much.
Thanks for your time, Perry. I appreciate that. I just got word from Dr. Mahan down at the coroner's office. The victim died from 4 gunshot wounds. But what would be Robert Burkett's motive? What would cause him to want to shoot well-known Santa Rosa realtor Paul Zimmerman? Maybe J.R. Brown will know. He's an associate of Zimmerman's. Mr. Brown, what can you tell me of your colleague's connection to Robert Burkett?
Well, Burkett just bought a share of Zimmerman's real estate business 2 weeks ago. Paul said Burkett wanted his money back and, well, he was expecting trouble over it. Paul's been awfully nervous, which is unlike him. Burkett told Paul this was going to be settled like men.
Do you know where this Burkett lives?
Yeah, he and his wife rent from Mrs. Nichols out on Sebastopol Highway.
Thank you. Sebastopol Highway. Looks like it's time to take a drive clear out to the country. Oh, well, hello, Mrs. Nichols. I'm George Hoyle with the DA's office. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions today?
Oh, Mr. Hoyle, I heard the awful news about Paul Zimmerman.
Right now, my focus is on Robert Burkett. How long has he rented from you?
He and his wife moved in about 2 weeks ago. When I heard they'd gotten married, I clearly intended to help, as Maddie's an old friend of mine.
So they just got married?
Yes, 3 weeks ago in Sacramento.
Were Burkett and Zimmerman in business together?
Robert Burkett bought a share of Paul Zimmerman's real estate business. At first things were fine, they were on a first-name basis. Then Robert heard something about the business and wanted to talk to Paul about it. That's why I drove him to Santa Rosa. If I'd have known Robert had a gun, I'd have never taken him.
You drove Burkett to meet Zimmerman?
Yes, Maddie went along with me. We were going to shop on 4th while the men talked. Then we heard Paul was shot and Robert was in jail.
Thank you, Mrs. Nichols. Well, Mr. Burkett,
Yeah.
we finally meet face to face. I'm George Hoyle from the DA's office, and it's time to answer up. Why did you murder Paul Zimmerman?
Murder? Well, I'm in no condition to answer any questions right now. You can clearly see that. But murder? No, it was self-defense.
Oh, don't go playing the baby on me, Burkhead. Let's have it. What happened?
I'm a restaurant man from Nevada. I met Zimmerman about 2 weeks ago and bought into his real estate business as an investment. Gave him $1,000 cash and a note for 800 more. He promised me big payouts. But since then, things weren't working out.
How's that?
Well, I found out he took $500 from my wife in a shady deal. I told him I wanted out. Only he got mad, see? Said he spent the money I gave him. He said we'd talk about it and settle up in the morning. I met him at his office like he asked. He told me to take a ride with him to see a client. On the way we talked, and when we pulled up at Davis Street, he grabbed me around the head. "I'll break your neck," he said. He was grabbing my face and poking my eyes out. I've carried a gun for years. When I couldn't get away, I fired.
That's enough, Hoyle. I've given instructions to my client not to talk to anyone.
Well, I should have known. Mr. Cowan, you must be Burkett's mouthpiece.
That's right.
I'm his attorney, sir, and this is a clear case of self-defense, not premeditated murder.
And how is that?
Zimmerman clearly tore my client to pieces, forcing him to defend himself. Had he planned to murder Zimmerman, he would have continued that ride to the country, where he could have killed him out there with no witnesses. And speaking of witnesses, your so-called eyewitnesses were more than 200 feet away from the car at the time of the observation. Are you aware that Dr. Mann found skin fragments under the dead man's fingernails? This proves he was attacking my client.
Yeah, or defending himself.
Mr. Burkett surrendered himself and asked to be taken to the sheriff. But you, Hoyle, you want to see him hang.
Hey,
Huh?
who's the dame?
Hey, that's no dame, that's my wife. Oh.
Burkett drew his wife close. They whispered in hushed tones. Nobody listened. Nobody even tried.
When I heard the news, I became hysterical.
Hysterical? Why, I find that difficult to believe, Mrs. Burkett,
And why's that?
because I remember you. And I know that you were married to George Forschler. You remember the sap that you shot and wounded nearly 18 months ago?
Well, yes, but I trailed my husband to the home of another woman. And when I returned home, he locked me out. I demanded entry and he struck me, as he had done before. So I fired my gun in self-defense, wounding him in the shoulder. He refused to press any charges. We later divorced.
Yeah, well, you and your husband here, you sure both like guns. And you both like self-defense. What a coincidence. And in my book, too many coincidences? Well, that ain't no coincidence. What a cast of characters we have here. We took this case to trial to prosecute Robert Burkett. As far as I was concerned, this joker had just played his final flop card in this poker game with death.